big fan of mulch. I'm a big fan of mulch. I think it's just, it really does simplify the whole process. It feeds the soil life. It keeps water in the soil. It builds organic matter. It keeps the soil life fed. There's just so many reasons to mulch. I use old round bales of hay. I get them for $25 a piece, and it doesn't take many round bales to really have just a deep, deep layer of mulch in the garden. Is there a question? Yeah.
Do you feel like with the round bales that you struggle with importing weeds or grass?
Yeah, everybody says that. My experience or my understanding is that for starters, my field, which is now cropland, was a hay field for a long time. And so there's been probably centuries of hay seeds dropped on that ground already. So a little more among friends is absolutely nothing. The other thing is that when you've got earthworms present at high levels, my understanding is that they actually digest most of the soil a few times going through the growing season, and part of what they digest are seeds. So they're actually eating the weed seeds or hay seeds. And also that if the hay is thick enough, any seeds that germinate on the ground can't see sunlight. Any seeds that germinate that are still on the stem don't have access to soil, and you have very, very little actual weed germination, hay germination, and grass weeds growing. Either way, I don't think it's a problem to have green plants growing around my crops. We just talked about spacing, and like I put my brassicas 3 feet on center. Kale, collards, broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage. They like a good 2.5, 3 feet. That's what they would like as far as space. And so if there's something growing in between them, until it gets tall and shades them out, I don't think it's a problem. And even when it does start to get tall, I rip its head off and lay it down and call it mulch. So I don't really have a problem with things growing up here and there, which is all you're really going to get because of the logistics of the situation. Yeah.
Do you think that there's any risk of it making excesses when you're adding lots of mulch?
What kind of excesses?
Potassium or phosphorus?
I've heard about potassium excesses out west from organic matter, but I think the soils are generally high in potassium in general. No, no. I mean, as I understand, if you actually do a assay of your soil, you'll find, thousands and thousands of pounds of potassium actually present in the soil. So a little bit more is not necessarily it's not going to imbalance the system. What shows up on the soil test is some of what's available. It's what's available, but there's a whole bunch more in reserve. This is not like soluble potassium. It's potassium in an organic construct, and my understanding is it's not taken up by the plant if it's not needed. So it's not necessarily an issue. Not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of. No. Yes.
Do you have a way to make sure that hay has not been treated with something that's going to kill the plants that you put it on?
Absolutely. I pay close attention to what my neighbors are up to, and I only get hay from people who don't put anything on their hay fields. Generally what goes on where I'm from is that there's not a lot of farming left, but there are a bunch of hay fields left, and the people who own the hay fields aren't farmers, and there are farmers who hay the fields for them. And the farmers who hay the fields for them don't have any interest in putting any money into the land. So the last thing they're going to do is put any fertilizer or any sprays on. They're using that hay as feed for their cows, pretty much, in the winter. And some bales get rained on or don't get eaten, and that's what I get. So, yeah, I know it's not this way in other parts of the country necessarily, but there's almost nothing put onto the hayfield ground. And I know that my neighbors that I'm getting hay from, I know they don't put anything down. So, yeah.
Discussions that we had about this at several meetings I've been to, where everyone was afraid to buy hay to use for mulch, buy straw to use for mulch because you can put pesticide in the garden and do all this other stuff. But it's my understanding that we don't really put pesticides and things on hay. That's not typical.
It's not typical for hay.
Sometimes watch out for barley and
for straw, sometimes herbicide will be put on to kill
Right.
the other weeds.
So look out
So
for
you
wheat
have.
and barley.
So if you're buying straw, which is generally very expensive, then you may have an issue. I know some friends who have an organic farm got bedding from a horse place, and they, composted it and put it on the tomatoes, and all the tomatoes were totally tweaked out because there was an herbicide
Right.
on the straw that made it through the compost pile that caused them to almost lose their certification.
But
Yes.
there's not as much likelihood of that hay as there is on straw.
Good old,
I wouldn't say that's necessarily true.
Yeah.
Our neighbors won't sell us hay specifically because they spray Graze on, which is,
It's a broadleaf herbicide.
It's a broadleaf
A lot of people
herbicide.
around here use it. 2,4-D.
quite
So I have to
common.
ask my
Agent
neighbors
Orange.
whether they're,
as with anything, I'll say this again, I said it yesterday, anything you're bringing onto your farm, figure out where it came from, what the story is. People aren't usually gonna lie about it.
People are honest.
They'll tell you the
Most people
truth.
don't think that these chemicals are, like, I've talked
But
to
all you have to
farmers.
do is ask them.
I ask them, I said, I'm really organic, we don't use any chemicals, we don't use any herbicides. Sometimes the guys will say no, and I always do because I stay on the phone and another 15, 20 minutes on a second call, I ask them again. I've been told no, gotten hay, and then later they said, oh, it had Graze on. But they
Yeah.
don't think it's a chemical or a herbicide. Like, I've had even people that work for my family who were the farm manager be like, we don't use any chemicals.
Yeah.
And they're using atrazine, semazine, 2,4-D, buckets.
We don't use any, yeah, there's an
We're all
organic
natural.
farmer in the
We're all
next
natural.
couple towns over who does field work
And
for other
that's-
people.
They're not trying to lie,
And
that's really the.
He doesn't use
knowledge.
anything except he uses Roundup for the edges of the fields. So, ask and have a relationship.
Kind of softly approach it.
It's a
and kind of
relationship.
go back and ask
It's a
in a
relationship.
different way and
I,
know some of the brand names, because they do know the brand names, like, or just say, what did you put on, just stress to them that you're just trying to, so important for you as a grower, like, I usually, even though I'm not organically certified, I just say, I'm organically certified, I could lose my certification, clients who are organically certified, so I'm sourcing it, so if you kind of make it a big deal, then they might pay a little more attention to.
I know my farmer, and I know that there's only once or twice a year when he's out in the field. Like, I can see the fields where he's mowing. I know what he
It can
does.
last for 3 years.
He comes to mow, and then he teds, and then he bails.
Yeah.
And then you don't see him until he comes again. There is nothing going
There's a lot
on.
of land like that. so
There's
you
a
have
lot
to
of
find
land
a-
like that. So just to talk to the farmers and figure it out. But yes, a very important point. Thank you for bringing it up. Yes.
Glyphosate has a half-life of 22 years, I think.
Yes. Absolutely. Roundup, it's called, the technical name for it is glyphosate. It is a trace element chelator. The way it works is by tying up manganese, copper, zinc, cobalt. That's how it technically works. It pulls those trace elements out of the plant. They're critical for enzyme system function, and it basically kills the plant by making it not able to function, by tying those things up.
Compounding the problem is that this product was
I'm sorry.
developed as a bacterial killer and not a,
And that's why we've got all these problems with people's gut flora and all the, what's wrong with the kids these days? The autism, direct correlation between autism and our gut floras being off and these trace elements being tied up. It's brilliant. The people of the science at MIT, it is absolutely directly correlated, categorically, end of story. Yes.
Major chronic diseases in the United States.
We're gonna die if we don't figure this out.
Let's figure it out.
It's the way life works. If we don't figure out how to do something about it, if we don't figure out how to change the situation, we're dead. Those of us who do figure it out are going to stay alive. Those of us who don't are going to be dead.
There's a material
Nature
available-
figures this thing out. Nature has rules for how this works.
There is a material available now to get it out of your
Let
body.
me ask a question, answer it when and if it fits.
Yes.
What's the message we send to, not us, but to our customers, to cause them to change their behavior and put value on better quality food that looks the same as the store, when they don't yet understand? They have money for data plans, they've got money for this and for that, but not
This
for
is
food.
part of the systemic work of the organization is putting together this rhetoric into forms that are readily available. For me, the question is one of flavor. It's a conversation. You can't use one-liners. You can't. It's not about a quick, little bumper sticker. It's about conversations and relationships. I'm not a big fan of the short, faddist kind of shtick. I'm a fan of relationships and conversations and understanding, and you begin to have conversations. I used to be very evangelical about this kind of stuff. I used to try to tell everybody. I was like, oh my God, do you understand? Blah, 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 blah. Guess what happens when you push against people?
They shut down.
They push back. They don't. So
Some of them
I,
are some of them.
yeah, either way, it doesn't work.
Effective.
So my perspective is, you know, if there are people who are curious, I'll talk to them. If there are people who are not, they have no idea what I do with my life. They have no idea what I'm up to. I try to be a good citizen. I try to be a good father, you know, and I try to lead a good life. And my experience has been that people are curious. People who are curious are receptive, and those are the ones I talk to, and they get excited and they try to tell everybody, and then they realize that most people don't care. Some people do, and you share with them, and it's word of mouth, it's relationships, it's organic, it's that fungal, you know, mycelial web of networks. It's a conversation. It's a conversation in a relationship. It's not a pitch. And the more well we can organize the content and the facts, you know, we will hopefully have some short videos that can be downloaded and forwarded and Facebook and all that kind of stuff. But step by step. Yeah. All right. So plant visual analysis is our next major section here. It comes in a few different components. I'll just start here with at the beginning, assessing plant status. I like to, when I'm going out to the field, not just go out and start doing what I'm planning on doing, but to go out and on the way, as I get close to the edge, stop and say, "Hey guys, how you doing?" If I'm opening up my hoop house, "Hey guys, anybody ever been hit by a wind of like, hey,
Yeah.
good morning, how's it going?" Like there's this intense like force of like ebullience that comes out of the hoop house. If you're not careful, it'll hit you. Like it's like a wind that hits you. I've felt that. Some people know what I'm talking about. If you know how to read body language, I'll suggest you know how to read plant language. You have human body language, animal body language, plant body language. Feeling poor. Feeling right? Look at the plants. How do they feel? What's their body language? What's their you know, physiological shape? Just silently, without embarrassing yourself, without telling anybody what you're up to, in your mind, in your heart, say, "How's it going? What's up?" And you don't need to sit there and wait for an answer to come to you. Just go about your day, go about doing what you're doing. I have this experience in my life where I'll go out there, I'll be doing whatever I'm doing, I'll be picking, I'll be tying, I'll be mulching, I'll be weeding, and I'll get into this like, there'll be this like lyric from a song that'll get into my head, and there'll be like this beat, it's like a groove, like boom, 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 and I'll be grooving away, right? I'll just like this lyrical commentary just repeating itself in my head like a, you know, what do they call those things? Mantra. And 5 minutes into it or 10 minutes into it, I'll actually look at the lyric. Instead of just repeating it over and over again, I'll like, what are the words in the sentence? And so often, those words have some really interesting connection to what I'm doing or what I maybe should be doing for these people, for these plants. Like that's how I feel it. That's how I get it. Is the words will come and it'll be through something that I don't listen to music very much. I don't know a lot of songs, but there'll be like these random things that come to me, or I'll be just working along and my mind will be, you know, going wherever it goes, and I'll be meditating on the topic of whatever. You know, I'll just begin to think, and like I'll be having all these thoughts, and I'm not really aware of what I'm thinking about, but my mind will be sort of traveling around this general topic. I find it happens when I'm busy doing something. Sometimes my mind goes. Yes.
Have you read Stephen Buhner's The Lost Language of Plants?
Yes.
I'm reading that right now.
Brilliant.
This is really,
I'm talking about this antenna
Yeah.
systems
Yeah.
in a little bit. Yes, absolutely. Buhner is absolutely on it. Totally on it. Yeah. And we can talk about that right now. We'll just bring up Buhner. But it fits later in the agenda, but it also fits here, interestingly. I don't have a TV in my house. I grew up with no TV. I know when my kids get access to a screen, you see them like,
Yeah.
just like totally like, that's what I'm like too. Like you get a TV, turn it on, I'm like,
In a restaurant, I'm like,
I should be having a conversation with you, but I'm totally fixated on nothing of consequence. Every now and then, like, you know, the Patriots are in the Super Bowl or the Red Sox are in the whatever playoffs or something. And, you know, I like to go to the bar and watch a I like to watch the game, and I don't have a TV, so I go to the bar to watch the game, right? So if I was to go to the bar and say, I was talking to the divas of my tomato plants today, and they were telling me, you know, poof, out the bar you go. If I said I had a gut feeling about something, you're like, oh, what was it? You know what gut feeling is, right? We know what divas are, you know, intuition. Right? We've got some woo-woo kind of words that some people use and feel comfortable with, and we've got other non-woo-woo words that some people use and feel comfortable with. And my understanding is they're exactly this. They mean the same thing. They come from the same place. We've got different languages for the same thing. And this gut feeling thing. I mean, maybe I should just talk about it now for a second. Although I have to explain the whole thing to properly explain it. And I'll get to it. So whether you think you're talking to the divas, or whether you're using your intuition, or whether you're just having gut feelings, I don't really care what your words are. But for me, it's about that realm of things. It's about engaging on that level and being receptive to these things that come to you, and being curious and not sort of discounting things out of hand, but actually being present with what's going on. And you don't need to trust it necessarily, but just if you're thinking about something, try it out and see what happens. My wife will ask me, what's going on today? What's your plans for the day? And I'm like, I don't know yet. I'm going to go for a walk, and I can tell you. I don't know what I'm doing today until, I know I have to pick. It's Thursday, I have to pick. Okay, fine, I'm going to be picking. But which job of the 18 jobs that could be done am I doing today? I don't know. I'll go for a walk, and it'll come to me. It'll be obvious to me. I've gotten to a point where I can just look and I can see. I can feel like, okay, these guys are ready for this. And there's no obvious thing to it, but it's one of those, it comes with time and experience. And I think a lot of people here are nodding. I see you nodding, and you know what I'm talking about. So, from that sort of perspective, I want to give a bunch of really specific physiologically symptoms that you can use to build your awareness if you're looking for that skill set. But understand, it's really, from my perspective, all coming from this perspective, this mode of sensitivity and intuition, and how the spirit is speaking to you, whatever the language is that works for you. I don't really care. But try not to judge other people who are trying to say the same thing, but have different words for it. So I'm going to run through a bunch of symptomology here for the next few minutes. Are the new growth tips standing erect? The new leaves, the new buds, are they like turgid and like vigorous and full of energy, especially in the morning, or are they kind of just hanging flaccidly? Do honeybees work the flowers, or pollinators if things are flowering? You may notice that at some points the honeybees will be fighting over the squash blossoms, and at other points they blow right by the squash blossoms and are heading for the clover. Right? Honeybees, it's really important to them, the quality of the pollen. If the pollen is of low quality, it takes more energy to turn it into honey than they get from it later in the winter, and so it's a net loss. They can tell whether the pollen is worth harvesting or not, and that correlates with the health of the plant. So if you can see the honeybees are ignoring your plants, or pollinators in general, that's a good sign those plants are on the down, hill side of things. You won't necessarily be able to see it because you can't notice with such subtlety, or you haven't learned to yet, or remembered to. But if you watch how nature responds to things, you can get clues sometimes for when we can't. Is the plant growing rapidly? Do you see regular growth or not? What weed families are dominant? Are you seeing the quack grasses and the rhizome grasses, or are you seeing the broadleaf weeds like pigweeds and lamb's quarters? Can you see the pattern? There's a bunch of these guys over here and a bunch of these guys over there. What did I do differently? What has happened differently that has caused these to grow here and not here? Look back, remember what happened historically in the past month, in the past 2 weeks, in the past year, and see if you can identify what the things are that happened that are now causing nature to respond by growing these weeds here and those weeds there. How many flowers are shedding per bunch? Are you getting 4 or 5 flowers per cluster? Are you getting 1 or 2 flowers per cluster? You may have noticed with tomato plants as an example that you start off the growing season with 4 or 5 flowers per cluster, generally at the bottom of the plant, and then it proceeds to 3 to 4, and then it goes to 2 to 3, and then it goes to 1 to 2. Have you noticed that? By the middle of August, your tomato plants are only setting 1 or 2 flowers per cluster. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. If you get to that point, it went from 4 to 5 to 1 to 2, and it proceeded from in that trajectory, and you didn't notice. right? You weren't watching to see that the numbers of flowers was decreasing. Why? What was the cause of that? What correlates with flowering? We don't notice these things. We don't notice the subtleties as they move and evolve over time. I was talking about the conductivity meter reading here. I'll talk about the Brix reading later. I like to say, I mean, maybe it's not the same way down here as up where I come from, but where I come from, not many people go to church, right? There's a bunch of these big old beautiful churches in the center of town, and there's not many people in them. Right? Sunday morning is not a lot of people in church, and I say, taking an hour off a week to commune with the divine I don't think it's a bad idea at all. And if you don't want to go to church, that's fine with me. I don't care where you go, but if you want to take an hour off every week and have it be a sacred time when you're going to go out and commune with nature and be present with your plants, I think that might not be a bad idea at all. Just call it Tuesday mornings at 7, call it whenever you want, but go out and spend some time and be present and watch and notice one week, next week, and really engage the process of being present. Step aside, don't just do it a little bit here and a little bit there, but formally set aside a time of being present and watching and noticing and feeling and being receptive and communing with what's going on around you. My experience is that people who do that learn an amazing amount in a year. If you have a regular practice of going out and actively looking and noticing and discerning all these nuances that you wouldn't otherwise necessarily see. I tell stories about these people in the city. I think I made references to it yesterday in New York on rooftop gardens who, are so proud of their rooftop garden and how they call themselves urban farmers. And I was down there giving a lecture and I heard about this group, and I went up on the roof and the tomato plants looked horrible. They were these little, they were purple and their leaves were small and they were and they were so proud of their tomato plants. They were so look, we're farmers. I'm like, look at your plants. I didn't say anything. I was trying to be polite, but we don't look at our plants. We don't know what healthy looks like. We had this late light come through a few years ago and everybody said, my tomatoes are so healthy. And then they were dead.
I know.
If they were so healthy, then they wouldn't have been dead. They weren't healthy, but you don't know what you're looking at. If you know what you're looking at, you can see the signs of dis-ease long before it turns into something deadly, right? We can do this with humans. We know with humans, we can look at them and see, you've lost your color. Your coat is not as shiny as it used to be, right? Your skin is not the right color. Right? We know these subtleties. We know how to read them in humans. We know how to read them in animals sometimes. We can easily read them in plants if we learn to look with that kind of an eye. How thick are the stems? How thick are the calyxes? How thick are the leaves? What color are the leaves? What color is the sap? Spacing between the nodes, petals on each flower. There's so many wonderful little pieces here. Color of the sap. This is a wonderful one. I'm not sure. Do you mind getting me one of those leaves from the back? When you're back there? Thank you. Really, really simple process. This is a modified vice grips, obviously. It's a vice grip with 2 pieces of metal welded onto it. If you join the organization as a participant, you get this and the refractometer and the little chart. But you can take just this outside and you can look at plants and you can discern how they're doing. Look at this. By squishing a leaf and just looking at the sap that comes out. So you want to see something that's really dark, so dark green in color that it's almost black. See, that's not a dark green color, right? It's definitely green, which sometimes it's not, and it's watery. What you'd like to see is something that's actually dark, so dark that it's almost black, and it's so viscous that you can put a drop between your thumb and forefinger and you can pull your finger apart and it'll be sticky. And that's the consistency of sap that you want. And then of course you can taste it. It's not sweet.
It's very marginal.
Yeah, and look at the color of the leaf. You can tell where the color of the leaf is not.
Well, it's different kind too, but it's still not.
Yeah.
Than very marginal.
Yeah. So, correlate your physical experiences, your taste, your sight, your aesthetics of structure, your conductivity. When you begin to monitor these things in order, in relationship to each other, you can get to a point where you look at them and say, right? And then ideally we'll talk in a minute about specific minerals and their correlations with specific symptomology. and you can say, oh, it looks like potassium to me. As far as I'm concerned, this section of the course is the weakest section of the course. This wisdom that was present, I think, to a large degree in our communities and our cultures is to a large degree lost. We have some good books out there which lay it all out. There's one of the best books out there is Mineral Nutrition in Higher Plants. It's a college textbook. It's a grad textbook. Mineral Nutrition in Higher Plants, which lays out the logistics of specific minerals, specific visual symptomology, etc. Marshner is the editor. It's a series of articles from different authors. Color of the leaf, all the various shades of green. Thickness of the calyx, the stem that holds the fruit. When that stem that holds the fruit starts out, it's holding a flower. You can look at the stem and you can see how big is the fruit going to be. Right? If it's a thick stem, it'll be a big fruit. If it's a thin stem, it'll be a small fruit. The plant is telling you, it's telling you ahead of time how big the fruit's going to be if you know to look and see. People may have noticed with tomatoes as an example again that at the beginning of the growing season they'll oftentimes start out as big, right? Fruit, whether it's a 12-ounce fruit or a 1-pound fruit, but by the end of the growing season they get much smaller. Cherry tomatoes do the same thing. They'll start out as big, almost golf ball sized fruit at the beginning of the year, and they'll end up marble sized at the end of the year. Anybody notice this? Cherry tomatoes? No? They really modulate in size over time based on the environmental conditions. I remember going to our local health food store one time, and it was like September, and there were quarts of cherry tomatoes, and they were like literally marble-sized cherry tomatoes. And I was like, that was a lot of work for that $3. I mean, how many marbles do you put in a quart? There's a lot of them. Potassium, right? If you didn't know what you're looking for, if you didn't know what the cause was, you'd say, well, this is what happens every year. Every year the fruits get smaller. Every year this happens. Every year this happens. And you consider it to be normal. I consider it to be normal for potato bugs to eat the potato plants. Normal for flea beetles to eat brassicas. It's not normal to sign something being wrong. We just don't know what it is.
Does Marshner's book get into visual assessment?
Yes, it's got lots of pictures in it. Lots of pictures in it. It's specifically, this is what copper looks like, this is what zinc looks like, this is what potassium looks like. Different plants. Horse Marshner, I think, but Petra Marshner is the most recent. His daughter, a horse, died. Mineral Nutrition in Higher Plants is the book, is all you need.
You can get it on Amazon.
You can totally get it on Amazon. There's versions, there's editions 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. There's hard copies, there's soft copies. Get it used. I think you can get it for like $45 or $50 used. And version 4 and version 3 are just fine. You don't need to get the most updated version. Stem strength, you should be able to, stem size, you want thicker stems. Like think about trees in the forest. Anybody ever been in a forest where there was too many trees too close together? Like oak trees every 20 feet and they're 50, 60 years old. They're these just like, they go straight up and you got a few branches on top. Right? That's not the structure you want. You want the structure of a big oak tree that grew up in the middle of a field. You want that big, broad, thick trunk, regular branching. You want that kind of a physiological structure. Stem strength, you want the stems to be able to bend without breaking. Ever walk through a zucchini, picking zucchini and had the stems pop off when you look at it the wrong way? Pop, 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 right? Summer squash, right? That's not what should happen. The stem should bend and then bend back without breaking. That brittleness is not a sign of health. Stem hairs, generally more stem hairs is better. Solid stems and grains in brassicas especially is entirely plausible, although it does not occur regularly. Hollow stems connotes a functional calcium deficiency. Stem shape, you'd like to have round stems, not oblong stems. You ever look at a broccoli plant, you might oftentimes find an oval-shaped stem, not a round-shaped stem. Generally, the more off that stem shape is, the more a calcium deficiency you're going to be experiencing. Internode points, the space between the branches, you would like that to be closer, not farther apart. Think about, cucumbers or melons or summer squash or any kind of a viney plant. You'll see that in some cases they get leggy and this is a long space between the branches. You'd like that to be more tight than far apart. Leaf thickness, thicker is better. Thinner leaves, you may notice that there's a broad disparity in leaf thickness over the growing season. Sometimes they're really nice and meaty and like a steak, and sometimes they're like papery thin. I'm beginning to go here on this handout to correlate some of these things with specific minerals. So here, leaf thickness, it says Fe, Mg, and K are associated with this. That's iron, magnesium, and potassium. Those who don't remember their periodic table of the elements. What does that mean? That means that if you see that the leaves in your summer squash plant are getting too thin, or they feel really papery thin, you can take some iron sulfate, some magnesium sulfate, and some potassium sulfate, solubilize each of them in water, and spray some on one plant, some on the next plant, and some on the third plant. Come back the next day, come back 2 days later, and see if any of those plants have thicker leaves. Right? You can experiment and discern and practice and begin to find, oh, in this case it was iron. I need to add some iron sulfate. I'm getting a functional iron deficiency.